Today, we're talking to Soukaina Sourouri. She is the first Muslim Arab American president of the Staten Island Women's Bar Association. She's also going to be a speaker at our Break into Law School conference. Today, we're talking all about her roller coaster of a journey, how she managed to graduate law school debt free, and also managed to take the bar during quarantine. This is an episode you don't want to miss. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Break into Law School. I'm your host, Lavetta Jenkins. Welcome, Soukaina. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you, Alberta, for having me.
I know we are going to have an amazing conversation because, honey, you have an amazing life story. Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, my name's Soukaina Sourouri. I am the eldest daughter of immigrants from Morocco. My parents immigrated to little old Staten Island, New York, and that is where they decided to raise their family. Um, I have a younger sister and a younger brother, and we were all raised right here in Staten Island.
Okay, so you said your parents came right over from Morocco and just parked it right there in Staten Island. What was that like for you growing up with parents who were immigrants to this country? Was it difficult? I noticed a lot of children have to act as like go-betweens. Was that your story as well?
Absolutely. I would say it was challenging because I always felt like I lived in limbo. When I was at school and with my friends, I had my American life and I was an average kid. And then when I was home, I was an Arab child. And I never felt like I belonged 100% in either place because I was different from the kids at school. I knew another language, I had a different religion. The kids that I went to school with were predominantly white, were predominantly Catholic. I did go to, I would call them lower income schools, that I was zoned for. And so I did have some black and brown children that I went to school with, but they were very different from me in that they're Black American or they're Hispanic. So they may have spoken a different language, but it wasn't my language. And I didn't have any Muslim or Arab friends until after I turned 18. I knew a couple of people here and there. I would say from kindergarten to 12th grade, maybe it was less than five kids for sure. Maybe one or two that I was friendly with or knew. But definitely the majority of my friends were either white, black, or Hispanic, and mostly Christian and Catholic.
Wow. That had to be very different. You said, kind of living in between two worlds. You've got this very Christian centered American world at school. And then when you get home, it is all things that are Middle Eastern and all things Arab American. So when you were out and about with your parents, how did you navigate that?
So, I mean, in terms of just advocating for them in the beginning, when I was much younger, I would say under 12, there was a lot more interpreting done on my part. So I had to translate for them. My parents were just learning the language. Actually, my mom and I learned English together because she did not bother to teach me English before I started school. She said, they'll teach you. I want you to learn Arabic at home. I want you to speak with us. And so she sent me to pre K not knowing any English. And that was the only year that they didn't complain that I talked too much. Every year after that, Sukina has a conduct issue. The conduct issue is she won't stop talking. So they got a year out of me.
I have the same exact story. It was always the conduct issue. It was always she talks too much. And look at both of us talking for a living. So it's
And
fine.
paid to talk. Isn't that nice?
I love it. I love it. So, what would you say led you to actually becoming a lawyer?
So I would say it was the constant state of advocating for my parents. Not only did I have to interpret language for them, but also culture, um, and norms, social norms that were normal for Americans that my parents were like, we don't know what's going on. And so I acted as their advocate, in school settings if they have to speak to my teachers, at doctor's offices, with any, I would say government forms. If we got a tax paper in the mail, my mom would be like, "What does this say?" And when they say, "What does this say?" they could read English at that point, but it was more, "What does this mean?" Make me understand it, because even though I know the words separately, I'm not understanding the concept as a whole. And so it really gave me a drive that to use my knowledge, right, to do good for others. And at some points, I did feel some like defensive things from my parents. We lived in a post 9/11 world. When I was in the third grade, that's when 9/11 happened. And I could feel the attitude towards my parents change, when I'm interpreting for them or talking for them in certain settings. And it definitely gave me a heightened sense of, reality and understanding how to speak and to watch my words and to be very careful in how my parents are presented and come across. And I would often say to people, like, my parents understand you. They know what you're saying. I'm just here in case there's some sort of miscommunication, because they might not get every word, but they're speaking like they can understand. And I really would push them to speak more, and try and be a little bit more independent, because I would tell my parents they're thinking you don't know anything and they're going to take advantage of you. You have to show you know. And if you don't understand a word, you ask them and you say, can you please explain that or use a different word? Because there's tons of interchangeable words, and sometimes people want to make things a little more complicated than need be.
I like the fact that you encourage them to kind of, take a little bit of initiative. And if you don't understand a word, even now, English is my only language, but if I don't get it, somebody needs to explain the word to me. So I'm so glad you had them do that. And I'm sure that that kind of boosted their confidence with speaking with others themselves, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. And my
That's what
mom's
I
just that like fiery personality to begin with. And so she wasn't going to let a little thing like language stop her. We actually ended up both learning English around the same time. She would do like my spelling words with me. She would test me on vocabulary words. So we really were thriving off of each other. And at the time, it was me and her. My dad worked mostly, and my siblings weren't born yet. So we definitely got a closer bond. But just that overall advocating for them. And as the oldest child of immigrant parents, especially the oldest girl, I think there is just a different level of responsibility and commitment you have to your family. And I think that was really the driving force in what am I going to do for a living? And it's like, I love advocating for people. And my mom did want me to become an interpreter. She's like, you're good at language. Like, why don't you try and do this? And what I realized with interpreting is that you're supposed to interpret exactly what's said and not put your 2 cents in it. So that was not the job for me. And I luckily learned that early on, is that I didn't just want to translate for people, I wanted to make them understand and give them tools to help them solve issues.
That's good. I like that. So, with being the eldest daughter, and trust me, I know that plight as well, with being the eldest daughter and kind of the helper at the home, and more so your mom's daughter, but also kind of friend, sort of. How was going to college for you? Because you graduated and you went to college. What were your choices? Did they give you the option of going away?
That's funny. That was never a choice. I tried it. I definitely,
Okay.
as the oldest, I pushed a lot of boundaries on my parents. They will tell you that I Americanized them very quickly. And I definitely tried. I went out for scholarships. I got grants at away colleges. I got grants at State University. And I'm like, look how good of a student I am that they want to cover 75% of my tuition. Can I? And my mom's like, sure. How far is it? Like, it's not far at all. 4 hours. It's a quick drive upstate New York. It's all day. My mom's like, that's a lot of time. You're gonna drive every day? I'm like, no, no, mom, I would stay there. She's like, no, try again. So once I realized that I had some geography issues, I then went back to the drawing board. And then my mom also gave me the reality check of our socioeconomic status. And she was like, I just want you to understand that we can't afford a college that's 20 or 30 or even $10,000 a year. So make sure that when you're looking at these schools, that you keep that in mind. So I'm like, okay, so I got to be close to home, and it's got to be under $10,000 a year. Where do these people want me to go? Where am I going to go? However, in New York City, we have a wonderful education system called the City University of New York, CUNY, and it's very similar to state funded schools, but it's city funded. And so, in my humble opinion, it is much, 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 much more affordable. It's even more affordable than a state school. I would definitely compare it to a community college. Um, and they have two different tier schools. Some they call them community colleges, and they're just 2 year schools, and then some they call universities, and they're the 4 year schools. So we have one on Staten Island, and it's called CUNY College of Staten Island, and that is where I went.
And you were home for dinner every night, weren't you?
Oh, absolutely. If I wasn't, yeah, I had to be home. Yeah.
Okay, so you did that for undergrad. And then how did you get through grad school? Where'd you go?
So now I'm a little older. I graduated in 2015. I took a year off to study for the LSAT. So I had tried to take the LSAT in my senior year of college. I did not do well at all. And it was for the first time in my life that I didn't do well at something academically. So I've always been an honor student since third grade. In being an honor student, I wasn't an honor student that was studying and, really pounding the books. Was just so happened to be blessed enough to be high achieving with low effort. That's how I like to just be honest about it. I didn't really study, unless it was for an exam the night before, but I definitely put minimal effort and easily got 85s and above without trying. And even in college, I got A's and B's and minimal effort, with the exception of like things like chemistry and trigonometry, which that's beyond my any of my natural talents. But I took the LSAT thinking it was another standardized test that I've taken dozens my entire life and always did pretty well. But life sometimes humbles you. And I was definitely humbled. I got a 138 the first time I took the exam with that. And I may have done one practice test, if that. It was shocking as someone who's never had to really study, never had to put in real effort. I was like, oh, maybe I'm not as smart as I thought I was. And then I was like, okay, so this seems like something I'm going to have to put in effort. And then I started looking things up and realizing that there were prep courses and stuff like that. I had an advisor, a legal advisor from school, and when I shared my score with him, he told me that I should actually reconsider law school, and that he didn't think I was going to actually ever become a lawyer, but that there was other master's programs out there and, other things that I could do if I was interested in law. I took that advice and I put it in my pocket for a second and I said, okay, I'm going to try again. And this time I'm going to study. Like, I can study like everybody else and I'm going to do well. I took a course, paid out of pocket. I want to say it was like $1,500, which was a lot of money. And I started taking the course. And to be honest, I did not put my best foot forward. I think I was not in the space mentally to do so. And I think I still had some arrogance, and that humble pie wasn't enough. I think I got humble pie. Maybe I need a humble cake because I was like, all right, I'm taking this course. I'm going to be fine. It's like 10 weeks. I'm going to take the LSAT again. I'm going to ace it. Well, $1,500 later, 3 months later, I got a 143. So my 5 points. And now I'm like, all right, the advisor may have had a point. This might not be for me. And maybe I need to consider other options. At the time in 2015, 2016, the LSAT, you were only able to take it 3 times in 2 years. So there was a cap on it. So I'm like, all right, I already took it twice. Clearly this is not for me. Like there are other things out there, right? I then started looking up based on my GPA and my LSAT score what schools would accept me, if any. And let me tell you, it wasn't looking great. The options in schools that would accept me with my GPA, my LSAT score, and that I would be able to commute to, because my parents were still like, you're not living anywhere except our house, were very, very, very limited. So I applied to the CUNY School of Law, which is the public law school here in New York City. It still falls under the CUNY system, the City University of New York system. I don't know what I was thinking because I definitely didn't fit the qualifications, but I applied. And for the first time in my life, I received a rejection letter. That was the humble cake I was talking about. Because when you see black and white on physical paper of mail that your mother handed you that she's already opened, because you know your mail. And I just read, we regret to inform you. And I was like, they don't want me. However, the second part of that rejection letter said, however, we have a pipeline to justice program that we believe you'd be a good candidate for. Please, if you're interested in applying, please contact us. So I looked it up, and Pipeline to Justice, that's run by the CUNY School of Law, is a program for people who did not do well on the LSAT, and it's a two-step program. So the first step is they prepare you for the LSAT themselves. They have a hired professor, and I would say she is the best professor I've ever had in my entire life. And I tell people that all the time. Her name's Carolyn Nelson, and just who she is as a person really came through in her teaching. And it was the first time I've connected with a teacher on that level. I just have an immense amount of respect for her because without her, I wouldn't be here. And so the program was 3 months of test prep, of LSAT prep, and then you were to take the LSAT exam in February. After results, if you got a result high enough for them, you were then able to take the second portion of their course, which was like a writing portion. It was like, I would call it like a prerequisite to law school. They wanted, because you were already my words, not theirs, you were a weaker student or a weaker test taker, they wanted you to take a writing course prior to starting law school to ensure that you had the right tools to actually be successful in your first year and beyond. So I was like, you know what? I've got nothing to lose. I've got one more chance to take it. Their price was half of what I paid to that big test company. So I was like, all right, so I'm going to do it with them. even if I don't, get whatever score they want, if I improve it enough, maybe I can go other places. I was trying to see how far I could make Delaware, go to Delaware University and come back the same day. I was doing wild things. So I applied, I got into the program. I started the program that fall 2016. So a year after I left, I graduated college. I took it serious. I changed my attitude completely. I think they held the program in the law school, and that I think subconsciously changed something for me because as soon as I walked into the building, I felt something like I want to be here. This is my last chance. God has given me another chance, even though I may not have deserved it because I told you I was a little arrogant. I'm now going to put my best foot forward. I'm going to do everything in my power. So if I don't get the score that I need to, I can say with ease that I tried and it wasn't for me and I can move on to something else. But I'm not going to put in low effort. I'm going to give it my all for these 3 months, and God willing, I'm going to do well. And if God's not willing, then it's not going to be for me, and that's okay. But I have to put in the effort. That's what I did. I was breathing, sleeping, doing this test prep, and at the time I was working full time. So this was a nighttime program.
I gotta know, what was the final LSAT score?
So my final LSAT score was a 154.
Oh,
So a dramatic difference.
mm-hmm.
Um,
Good,
and
good,
I was accepted.
awesome.
To the program, and I did complete the second portion of the writing
Mhm.
portion, and I did go on to start fall 2017 at the CUNY School of Law as a part-time evening student.
So you went part time. First of all, congratulations, because I think sometimes when you are the kind of person, because I am very similar, I don't have to study. Things just kind of come and I just kind of learn from either hearing it once or doing like that crash study thing where you can hurry up and throw the information in there and then it kind of sticks and you can test very well. If you've rested on that for a long time and you think that you can do everything like that, both of us have had similar humbling moments where, something didn't go the way you wanted it to go. And it's like, what do you mean me? You get offended a little bit. What do you mean I didn't do it? So for you to learn that lesson literally after twice, because I'm telling you, first comes humble pie, then comes humble cake, then comes humble buffet. And I don't think you wanted the buffet.
Yeah.
So learning all of that and getting through it, you decided to go part time because you were working full time. How did that work out for you?
Well, if I could just share with you my work story because it's very interesting. I do say so myself. So in college, I took an internship course where I needed to do a legal internship somewhere. So I took the class because I thought it was going to be like an easy, it was my junior year. Like I have so much on my plate. Let me find an internship class to take. But then I found out I had to find my own internship. They don't just provide you with one. So I'm like, okay. At the time, I was working at a bagel store and I was meeting a lot of people. I'm very talkative, very friendly. And I had met this lawyer. Her name's Rosa Pinito. I was talking to her. I was like, oh, I'm going to need an internship. Do you by any chance have any available in your office? She's like, well, you can come intern for me, but I can't pay you. Like, we don't have a budget to pay you. I work in a small firm. And I'm like, oh, I'm not looking for payment. Like, I'm doing it for school credit. You just got to, like, fill out some forms that I went. And she's like, oh, yeah, no problem. So I did an internship with her. I took my class, did very well. And she really opened up a lot of doors for me that I had no idea existed. I never had met a lawyer or had that close of a relationship with a lawyer before. So she opened my eyes to a world I did not know existed. After I did the internship, I did it for about 6 months. Even though my class ended in May, I continued on with her until August just because I wanted to. And I was just really interested. And after that, she gave me the talk that everybody gives, which is like, oh, we wish we could hire you, but we're not hiring at this time. And I'm like, yeah, no problem. Like, I enjoyed my time. I got a lot out of this. I wasn't looking for a job. So I want to say maybe 4 months later, she calls me out of the blue. And I was still seeing her on a weekly basis at the bagel store, but she called me out of the blue and she says, "Are you interested in a part time receptionist position?" And I was like, "Of course." So I became a part-time receptionist for her at her office, and then it eventually became a full-time receptionist. Then just from training on the job, it became a secretary, and then it became a paralegal for her. So at the time when I was applying to law school, she had left the partner she was with and opened up her own firm in Staten Island, and I came with her. And then I became her office manager, her paralegal, her right hand, and it was me and her throughout this whole time. So I knew that I needed to go to school in the evening so that I can keep my job and help pay for the cost and travel, food, all of that fun stuff.
And still be home for dinner.
Exactly.
Still be home for dinner.
Dinner.
Speaking of, because your parents had you stay so kind of close to the chest, you were able to get through law school, through all of your college career, I should say, with probably a teaspoonful of debt. And I think that that is probably one of the most phenomenal things I've heard because although we hate to admit it, sometimes parents are right. But because they had you go to CUNY, it was actually very affordable and you were able to do it and come out zero balance in student loans.
Exactly. I would be the first that hates to admit it, but now I can definitely say they were right. They've always pointed me in the right direction, and college and grad school were no different. Because of my parents' strictness on you are not going away anywhere, I was able to go to both undergrad and law school at City University of New York, and I was able to pay out of pocket each semester, which, although it hurt in the moment, after the fact, I feel so much better knowing that that debt is off of me. I never took out any student loans. I don't owe any, agency money. The only people that I owe are my parents, who definitely helped cover when I could not finish the balance. But during law school, I paid every semester out of pocket. They helped when I needed it. And I'm so thankful and grateful to them for that because I wouldn't have been able to do it without them. And the good thing about owing Muslim parents is they don't believe in interest. So every penny that I owe them is interest free because interest.
Ooh. Oh, winning, winning, strict parents for the win. So I got to say this too in them being right. I think it all works together, just the way they set out on that path. And, even though the younger siblings do get to do a little bit more, they really kind of put a good work ethic in you and instilled something really strong inside of you because not only did you not give up, but you managed to become the first Arab American, basically Muslim woman to be the president of the Staten Island Women's Bar Association. How did you end up there?
Yeah, so that is the second part to the woman that I just spoke about earlier, Rosa Panito. She was actually involved in several bar associations. And when I was working for her, she allowed me, because she knew I was going to law school at night, that this is really something I wanted to do. She gave me a lot of freedom and the ability to attend outside social events with her. So she would take me sometimes to bar association events when I could go. She was actively participating in the Staten Island Women's Bar Association and was also a president at some point while I was working for her. So being with her, being in law school, I first joined as a law student member, and I was able to go to some, association events, some networking things, and then I eventually became a regular member after I graduated law school. And once I was admitted, I was encouraged by the lovely women attorneys that I had met while I was participating as a student member. I was really encouraged by them to apply for the board. And so I did. I got a position on the board. And then last year I was nominated to run for president. And so that's what I did. And yeah,
And here you are.
yeah.
And you never would have been able to do it without some good parents standing behind you and a few tests and maybe a couple slices of humble pie. But that wasn't, getting into law school and out of it wasn't necessarily where all of your tests stopped. I think there's a little bit of something that happened around the bar too. What was your bar experience like?
Oh, about it. Let me tell you. I graduated law school in May of 2020. So that is what I believe to be the height of the pandemic. And we're in New York, so it was very heightened at that time. In March of 2020, we all went home and never went back. That's when the Zoom School of Law came about, and we did everything virtually. So I graduated on YouTube. That was a good time in my parents' living room. Um, they never got to hear my name called out, but it did flicker on the screen for like a second. So the bar exam is traditionally held in July and February every year. So when you graduate law school, it's typically in May and you're expected to take the July bar exam. So although it was the pandemic, no one really knew what was happening. So they just advised us to study the way you were going to study as if it was in person. We had no talks of a virtual bar exam at that time. So we all thought, hey, it's May 10th. The bar exam is usually the last week of July. We got 3 months. This whole COVID thing is going to be sorted out. It's going to be, a little blimp in our history and we're going to move on past it. But the bar prep program that I chose, called Barbary at the time, it was going to be mostly virtual anyway. They had an option of you sitting in person for these bar prep courses, but I found out that actually the sitting in person is just you sitting in a physical classroom with the Zoom up. So I thought it was like a live instructor, but really they just played the videos for you, but you were in a classroom setting. So obviously because of COVID, they did away with the classroom setting and it was still the same course. So we took our course, we're studying into June, and then there is an announcement from the New York State bar examiners that the July bar exam is postponed until September. So we're like, okay. But again, COVID was still happening. It was only outdoors in New York. Like there was a lot of restrictions. So I believe that they were trying to figure out the logistics of getting thousands of people in one room to take an exam, which is a heavily proctored exam. And that was my own personal belief. I'm like, that's probably why they figure maybe in September things will be a little easier. It'll be open more. But I took it as a good thing. I'm like, oh, thank God. There's 2 more months that I could study and 2 more months that I can get it together. So we're studying into July. And one day on a Friday at 5:10 p.m., the state of bar law examiners send out a message that says the September bar exam is postponed until further notice. No date.
What?
Exactly. Yeah, these were dark times.
Very. I mean, yay for extra study time, but let's just get it over with.
Right. But when we were then all planning on doing September and then we just get it's postponed but no date, we freaked out. I freaked out. The law school sent out, a email blast to everyone like we're gonna try and figure out what's going on. Please don't panic, don't worry, take the weekend off, don't study anymore, until we figure out what exactly is happening. And so I want to say the following week there was a Zoom held by the school, and they were like, until we get an announcement, you guys should take like a break from studying. This exam isn't meant for you to study for 6 months. You're gonna burn yourselves out. And so I was in panic mode. I was like, I'm not the type of student that could just stop and chill. Clearly, I learned that through the LSAT, and I learned that in law school that I need to actually work for things. So even though they said stop, I slowed down, but I didn't stop. I didn't want to lose momentum. I want to say maybe it was a week later. It could have been 3 days, but it felt like weeks. They finally announced the bar exam would now be in October. I'm like October 5th and 6th, I want to say, of 2020. So now we have a date. We're ready to go. We start studying again. I had a job lined up that I was going to start right after the bar exam because typically that's how it works. After you take the bar exam, you then begin your, new law student waiting, they call it a law graduate awaiting admission. It's kind of like a title or an associate. And I was going to start that position come September. Once I let my employer at the time know, hey, the bar exam's being postponed again for another month. I'm not going to be able to start until mid October. I was then told, this is not the same employer, by the way, but I was then told, we'll see you in September or you won't have a position here. So you remember 2020, how the job market was. And now I'm like, what do I do? I've been studying for months. So I went back and used my negotiation skills. And I said, well, I can come in 1 day a week and I can work from home 1 day. And that's all I can give you for the month of September. It's really that important to you that I'm there every day, then, I appreciate the offer and I understand. They agreed to the 2 days, one from home, one in the office. So that worked out well. As September approached, I was just getting test anxiety that I've never gotten before. I just felt like the worst version of myself. Like, there's no way I'm a person who took the LSAT 3 times. There's no way I'm passing this test on the first try. And so I was having a really hard day one day, and my dad comes down to me and he says, what's wrong? Like, I've never seen you like this. I'm like, Baba, this is like a really hard exam. Like, I don't know if I'm smart enough. I don't think I could do this. And he's like, what happens if you don't pass? He's like, do they take your degree from you? I'm like, no. He's like, so what happens? Like, you can't do it at all? I'm like, no, Baba, I have to take it again. He's like, when? Like a year, 2 years? When? I'm like, February. And he looks at me and he goes, that's it? You just take it again? I'm like, Baba, but it's a lot. Yeah. He's like, who cares? If take it 10 times. You take it again. Nothing's going to happen, right? I'm like, I guess not.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to happen.
Shout out to the parents for always being right.
Yeah. And you know what? A lot of times I would say my mom definitely put some pressure on me academically. If you got a 90, why didn't you get a 95? You got an A, why didn't you get an A plus? Kind of thing. And once I got to college, that all stopped. And definitely in law school, my mom's like, just pass. Just pass. We want you to pass. We don't care what you got. Nobody's putting your grades on the refrigerator. We want you to be happy. And so they've grown to a lot, definitely changed, as have I, obviously. But when my dad told me that, it was just like the validation I didn't know I needed. And my dad's like, I'm just a taxi driver. I don't know anything about school or law or academics, but if you can take it again, just take it again.
Take it again.
And I love him for that because like he was so right, right? Like what's the biggest deal is you're gonna be upset, you're gonna cry, you're gonna get over it, and you're gonna try dust yourself off and try again.
Absolutely. Wow. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that he just was like, it's not that serious, baby. And you was like, but then I'm gonna have to, and he was like, okay,
Right.
take it again. That is so wonderful that in that moment when you had the greatest part of self-doubt that you were probably ever gonna have, he just came in, dropped one liner, and changed the whole perspective of everything. Did you pass the first time?
I did.
Of course. Of course.
I was very, very blessed to have been able to pass the first time because I know a lot of people that work just as hard, not or maybe even harder than I did, and were not fortunate enough. I did a lot of advocacy that summer. There was a big push during COVID for states to get rid of the bar exam and have just what's called diploma privilege, which means if you if you graduated law school, that you should get your license based on that instead of a standardized test. There was a lot of legislation pushed towards it, by law students and law schools in New York, and we really tried. There were a couple of states that did pass diploma privilege, so shout out to those people that got to benefit from it. New York, unfortunately, was like, mm-mm, try it with somebody else. So I still believe that it's just a standardized test. I don't believe that it tests you as a person. I don't believe I'm a better lawyer because I passed on the first try. And I don't believe someone's a worse lawyer because it took them two or three or four or 10 times. I believe it's a standardized test and it doesn't actually test your ability to be an attorney.
Hmm. That was such a good thing that you said. It doesn't, I mean, after you graduate, nobody says, "Hey, so what was your score? Or how many times did you take it?" They just know you passed the bar and that's it. That's all. And as your father would say, I mean, if you didn't pass it, just take it again. And if you don't pass it five more times, okay, pause, take it again. Some of the best advice I think came from your parents, and tell them I thank them for that. But I do want to say you'll be talking about this plus faith and so much more at our Break into Law School conference that's coming up in June. And I know that I, as well as everyone else, cannot wait to hear more about your roller coaster journey and how you are now standing tall, firm, and one of the best, as the young folk would say, to ever do it. I thank you so much, Soukaina, for being my guest today. I greatly appreciate you, and we can't wait to see you at the conference.
Thank you, and I'm so excited to be at the conference and share my knowledge with everyone else and let them know that lawyers may not look like you, lawyers may not look like me, but here I am, and so can you.
Absolutely. Thank you.